Hello and welcome to X-Men, the art and making of the animated series. My name is SVEN Larsen, and I'm the Vice President of Licensed Publishing for Marvel Entertainment. I'm joined today by legendary creators of the X-Men animated series, including Eric and Julia Lewald, Larry Houston, Rick HOBERG, and Stephanie Graziano. And about 2.5 years ago, I was surfing around the internet and I came across a book by Eric called Previously on X-Men. And I was like a big fan of the animated series. I'd worked at Marvel when the animated series originally premiered. And I was like, I've got to read this book and find out what this is all about. And so I ordered it and eagerly awaited for it to come to the office. And what I got was this amazing tome, is the only way to describe it. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of interviews with cast and the creators of the X-Men animated series. Really amazing, but with one drawback. It was in black and white. It looked a little bit like a textbook. If I ever wanted to, major in X-Men the animated series, which I hope somebody does someday, this would be the book I want. But what was missing was all the incredible artwork, all the incredible color, and all the incredible work that went into that series. So I found a way to track Eric down on the internet. It was actually pretty easy because, he puts himself out there. And we started talking. I sort of outlined to him the idea that I had that, this would be a great coffee table book. That it would be great to do the kind of art books that we do for the Marvel films, but sort of almost travel back in time and do that for the X-Men animated series. Luckily, Eric didn't think I was crazy. Actually liked the idea. Because it gave him a chance to not only revisit some of that material, but bring in a bunch of the wonderfully talented people he worked with on the series. So the great news is we have a bunch of them today, which means that I'm going to stop talking and throw it over to Eric and Julia. And they're going to introduce themselves. The other folks on the panel will introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk X-Men.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm Eric,
and I'm Julia Lewald. I was one of the writers on X-Men the animated series and got to be a fly on the wall for the whole process.
And I was responsible for the story, all the stories, beginning to end, the good ones and the bad ones. So if you like the writing, it's my fault. If you didn't, it's my fault. And so that kind of sums up what we did for 5 years. Why don't we pass it over to Larry Houston, who had a different responsibility.
Hi, my name is Larry Houston. I was the producer director of the X-Men, and I was in charge of making sure all the visuals for the show matched the comic books as best as possible. And I did my best to make sure that the fans would enjoy the show. I tried to put together the best worlds of merging comic books and cinema together to try and get the show out there so that it would succeed, and try working with Eric, trying to do something that was something that nobody allowed us to do. They thought everything we were doing was wrong, but you guys saved us.
Yeah, we're on. Okay, well, on to a head designer, Rick HOBERG.
Hi, I'm Rick HOBERG. I'm not on screen yet that I can see, but I did most of the main models designs initially. That is the X-Men themselves and Professor X and so forth. There, of course, were many other designers on this show after I got the main ones pinned down. And I came out of comics and animation both. I worked at DC and Marvel both, and ended up spending much of my time also in animation, starting at Hanna-Barbera, then Marvel, and all sorts of places like that.
Okay, and then last but absolutely not least, the poor woman that was in charge of everything on the show from beginning to end and had to make all of us get our jobs done. It's Stephanie Graziano, head of Graz Entertainment.
Hey everybody, Stephanie here. It was a really interesting experience. I'd spent many years in animation, had left Fox Kids to start this animation company, my husband and I. One of the things that we knew was that X-Men conversations were in the works between Fox and Saban. And we knew we wanted to be a part of it. We knew that we knew the right people. We made a point of gathering those people and having them as a part of the studio when the concept for the show actually came to fruition. We went in there and said, there's no better home for this project except with our guys. They are X-Men fanatics and they're the best artists in the industry, and we won the contract. So the rest is history. I'm so proud to have been a part of the experience and just love all of these guys enormously.
Thanks, Stephanie. Rick, you mentioned working in comics and working in for animation, and I was just curious what the differences are for an artist. If we could put up slide number 8.
Oh,
Just going to reference in here the
There we are.
Okay.
There's our Wolverine.
Yeah.
And how is he different? How would you draw him differently for a comic book and an animated show?
Actually, in this particular case, not that much differently, specifically because we were looking for a true comic book put on screen. It worked most of the time, not every time, because all this detail gets kind of in the way of some of the animation, but this gave us a great advantage in that fans finally got to see these characters realized as they wanted them realized. We know that now because 30 years later, this is the show everybody references when they're talking about comic book superhero shows.
and on panel number 2, Rick, I think the work that you were doing on that with all the character design, this was not a single person animated show. This had
Slide number 2.
slide number 2.
Yeah,
There were a lot of characters in this thing.
yeah, and I can tell you the layout on the Beast was by Will, because Will Ninio was really, he had certain characters he was really attached to. This was one. You can see his influence greatly in that.
Yeah.
So there were character instances where Will and I were collaborating on this stuff just because trying to rein in Will Ninio is near impossible. Creativity is constantly, bubbling up.
If we could really quickly in reference to Will, who was with Larry and Rick, that was the triumvirate. Those were the people that made the show look the way it looks. If we could get slide 13, please. This is original art by Will that was done specifically for the book. It's only available in the book. It's a beautiful team shot that he drew recently, not back in the 1990s, to add to the, and you can see he's got his own style. You can see the personality in those characters that's all Will's. And just as we go forward, we've got 3 or 4 of the top people involved in the show, but we couldn't go forward without mentioning Will, who was a real heart and soul, certainly, especially the very first year.
Yep, that's
And if we could get slide number 7 up there now, Stephanie, you and I guess Larry, you also on this one. This is the sort of before image of the Wolverine character with a bunch of numbers and stuff.
oh
And some of Stephanie's responsibilities about saying, you've got to animate this guy. Here's what he looks like. And Stephanie, can you tell them what we're looking at?
So our model pages, I think like Rick said, one of the things that we really were striving for in producing this series was keeping the look of it as close to the comic book as possible. There isn't a studio overseas that's worked with something as complicated as these characters all in mass. And we worked to give them as many details as possible, little nuances of lines, thicknesses, details, depth, anything that we could think of to help them translate these drawings into animated beings. And I got to hand it to the artistic crew because they spent hundreds and hundreds of hours detailing things that we wouldn't normally have had to do in any other animated series. And I think that that's one of the things that kept the integrity of the property together.
Yeah.
And here specifically, the fact that this was all hand drawn. We got to remind people occasionally, this is a while ago before computer animation was a thing. So everything was drawn by hand, and this is the color palette. You didn't have the luxury of going infinity color palette by using a computer screen. You had to call out each individual color and make sure the chips matched.
Yeah, and in some cases, we were limited by the library of colors that the studio had. And, you know, we were helping them mix palettes and order paints and, you know, stay as close to the true palette as possible.
Yeah, and if I might real quickly have us see slide 4, this is an homage to the gentleman at ABRAMS who edited us, who was the firm hand and made sure this book was as wonderful as what Eric Lewald. The first thing he said when he met us and said, when we were deciding whether to do the book or not, was, can you make sure to have the props from when Jubilee says something about chili fries and Mall Babe.
The Mall Babe.
Believe it or not, we found him. We found him in Larry's storage shed, and there it is. That was so.
Oh, geez.
Go ahead.
We have proof. We have proof a Mall Babe does eat chili fries, and there they are. But again, this is just one of those images. Someone had to design this.
Every single little bit of something, as Stephanie's, one of her right-hand women, Dana Booten, said, they'd send over massive boxes with thousands and thousands of elements overseas to Korea and hope 4 or 5 months later they'd get something back that looked like what they'd been sent.
You know, and part of the crafting of the book was, I'm sorry, just giant, a treasure hunt.
That's what I was going to ask you guys about, because I don't think people realize all this stuff does not sit in, you know, some sort of vault at Marvel or at Disney.
It's 28 years old, and we had people used to throw stuff out. They used to have beautiful artwork, you know, that they just wouldn't hold on to. Now they know.
They know now, but back then people were on to the next job, clear out the space, bring in the next production.
Luckily, people like Larry and some collectors and produce. There's one wonderful design artist who kept like everything he designed.
Mark Lewis, we have him to thank for just having a record.
thousands of drawings. So he's like an encyclopedia. Without those folks, we wouldn't have a book. It's nowadays when people write, produce books about animated shows, all the stuff's on computer, and you just have to call it up. And this is all, again, in a box in somebody's basement. And we thank them for it being there.
Yes, yes. And for example, like slide number 3, just to show you the kind of things that people held on to that we were able to find. This isn't, you're not going to see this image in an episode, but Larry, can you maybe talk to us quickly in just a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Yeah, I had to squint for that one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. It's a little square on my screen, but yeah, no, that was one of the shots. I think that's Master Mole.
Yes.
And one of the things I wanted to make sure everyone understood was the scale of everyone. So that's how we tried to do that and try and make sure that everyone involved overseas and also the storyboard guys knew exactly how to draw everyone in the scene at the right height, so that Master Mole would, he's a virtual, like a mountain sitting in his chair. And so a lot of we would design a lot of scenes like this for what we call size comparisons, and made sure that I tried to make sure that in every scene where that it was specific to include that in addition to the model packs of what we already had.
Right. Yeah. I just as a reference to the book, just something that we're really proud of. That's perhaps my favorite chapter. We take from the first idea, like, let's do Days of Future Past, and you write down a couple sentences about what that story is, through what you see it on screen 9 or 10 months later. Right. And we take the first 4 minutes of that show in the book and start from a premise to an outline, to a 10-page outline, to a 40-page script, all the way through a 900-image storyboard, which, I guess hard to see, weighs about 5 pounds. Yeah. And I wanted to ask Rick what it's like getting handed, 10 script pages and say, give us 300 images that play out this act.
Well, it's why I've aged, I can tell you that. These are the kind of shows that it has to do with the script. It has to do with what you guys write. Because if that's good, it's inspirational and pretty much it becomes a joy to work on. Certainly, I've worked on other shows that had less going on in them, and thus they were a grind to get done. But never the X-Men shows. Those were always great because I transferred from doing the design work to storyboard, and I storyboarded on the last few seasons for Larry. And it was that was fun. Those are great stories to tell, and the characters are all so interesting. They're just really fascinating characters in a lot of ways. There's a lot of depth to them, and that's another reason people love the X-Men is because they were real people to these folks. They loved Jubilee, they loved Cyclops, they loved Professor X, and they knew exactly who they were.
So this is one of the areas that Eric and Julia and I would spend some time with each other. We would get these scripts. Everyone loved them, of course. And then I had to adhere to a budget. and I would have to go back to Eric and Julia and say, okay, 300 props. Can we make that 200? So we would go back and forth a little bit over the scripts and try and make them so that they were actually producible. And again, couldn't have had a better time working together. They truly understood the imperatives of being able to meet the time and money for a project as well as the creative level.
Well, and just looking at slide number 5 here, panel number 5, having created the X-Men characters, suddenly in one man's worth, the opportunity to use the same characters, but in an advanced future in 2055, it's not just going into a computer program and remodeling the character briefly, it's completely recrafting a character here. We're seeing Rogue and Gambit here, and you guys had to create those completely brand new.
Yeah. So Larry, question. People tend to ask you at panels a lot when you mentioned that you're the director on the show, and again, you've got your 40 or 50 artists that work for you. What is it that how is it that you direct them to those 900 images that come out in each storyboard and bring the script to life?
I was very lucky that a lot of the artists that wanted to work on the X-Men, they were Marvel fans. There's a crossover in our industry, and so for me it was the pick of the best because everybody was wanting to work on our series. But for me, I would also ask the storyboard artists to try. I would try and also try and cast like maybe act 1, act 2, act 3. When I've worked with someone for a long time, one artist might love to draw women, or another one loves to draw robots, and I would try and cast like each act to a different artist that I knew once they read the script, it would make them so enthusiastic that they would put more than their usual effort into making the show great. And what I also try and do, what I tried to do was, Rick knows this also a little bit, was that we both grew up with Johnny Quest, with Doug Wildey. And one of the things he did to make the show work really well is that he didn't have a lot of animation, but man, those pictures looked so good on TV. You didn't mind that they didn't move a lot. And a little bit of that logic I tried to put into the show of trying to maybe minimize the movement, but try and maximize how good everything looked. And that way we were able to get a lot of detail into the characters, like the guy Sinister, he's got lines all over the place. He's got this rooster tail cape. And I wanted to keep all the detail, but I didn't want him to move. So I would revise the storyboard to make him more like Dracula, like coming in and out of the black like this. And also when he talked, you cut to someone else talking. When you cut back to him, he's over there. Or then when you cut back to him, he's over there. And then when he has this maniacal laugh, it would just, go back into black. And so there are things like that that I was inspired by, the Doug Wildey approach to making the shows look good, to try and maximize our budget and still make the show look like a living comic book.
Can I just add that he's referencing a technique they called radio with pictures. Jay Ward did almost all of his stuff like that. That is, all the Bullwinkle and Rocky, all the George of the Jungle. Most of it was just pictures with slides and other things going on. But he knew an engaged audience would put the two and two together.
Yep.
And it works really well. It worked beautifully in Johnny Quest. Just wonderful.
If we can look at slide number 10 here, just to get an idea of the full scale of the special effects, the colors, everything that had to go into making an animation cell.
There's the moment from Phoenix, and it gives you a sense that the just incredible complexity of the materials that Stephanie had to keep her people track of. There may have been that's just one drawing of what was photographed. A lot of the detail isn't in it. There could have been 6 or 7 cells laid on top of that one cell, and then every 12th of a second or so, 6 or 7 of them to get moved. So the tens of thousands of things that need to be drawn just to finish one episode, compared to the computer stuff today, it just astounds us. And how beautiful some of it is, even just in its elements, where that's just one of 4 or 5 elements that make that shot. And slide.
Slide number 12, just again showing what the world was like back then.
Backgrounds and then character shots, and there's three X-Men sitting in a plane, but they haven't been laid on top of each other yet.
Right. So the fact that this is what it took back then, and making sure everything lined up, making sure everything was photographed correctly,
and whose mouths were moving and what they were saying, and matching with the recorded dialogue, and just this immense job that somehow got done in months and not years, and on our modest budget. We were on. Somebody said we had Marvel stories on a Saban budget, and that was not a good combination.
That is true.
But yet somehow, we pushed, and Larry pushed, and the voice actors pushed, and somehow Stephanie kept as much of it as she humanly could, with us pushing all this stuff at her, and we made our budget and we made our schedule.
Yeah, Stephanie, you were like air traffic control, because
that's exactly what it felt like. I was envisioning what you were talking about there, and thinking back on seriously, there was the enormity of the number of people, the details. I mean, the guys would work on multiple episodes at a time, every episode having 40-page scripts and 500-page storyboards and 300 models, and all of this director's sheets and color keys, and all of this being boxed up and sent overseas, and communicating daily with the teams over there, seeing the stuff that comes back, watching the film, editing old school, where we're cutting frame by frame, trying not to create jump cuts but cutting out problems. And the process back then, and for a show like this, it's amazing that we got what we did accomplished. But I think just the passion and the fandom of every single person connected with the project is really what made it happen.
Stephanie, can I ask you, given these limited budgets and all the hard work you guys had to do, what was your reaction when they came to you and said, we want to do Dark Phoenix, and it's going to be a multi-part storyline. It's going to go across weeks and weeks. And
You know what? It's all the same. It's all the same, right? The hardest part is the longer series, you can get away with taking things out of order, you know, once in a while if something happens. In that case, you can't do that, and that was the biggest struggle, is making sure that everything happened in the way it's supposed to, so that every episode airs in order. And you know, there were problems.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Eric, I think that was the first time I'd ever seen somebody try and do a multi-part storyline like that in terms of Saturday morning animation. What sort of gave you guys the confidence and the audacity to do that?
Kind of naivete, ignorance, arrogance, not realizing how, you know, how much we were burdening everybody around us. The two, along with my lovely wife, the two main folks that helped in the writing of the 76 episodes were Mark and Michael Edens, friends of mine from college. So it's like with Larry and Rick and Will, those three and we three had 10, 12, we had over a decade of working together and friendship behind us. And so there's a great, you know, understanding and faith that if I hand Mark, say, can you come up with 5 tight episodes out of this Phoenix material, knowing that 3 days later he'd have something that was spot on. And I think it was like getting into X-Men in the first place, not knowing what a huge responsibility and huge job this was going to be. Just excited about getting the job. And to be honest, when we got the go-ahead to do the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix, we'd just been in New York, Larry and I had, and we're told, okay, you've done 26 episodes, we're going to order 39 more. And to me, that meant over a year of mortgage payments. So that's what getting a 5 and a 4-parter meant to be. 9 of those are decided. I don't have to spend a week coming up with each one of those stories. There's 9 of them. So it was kind of a joyful moment that those were assigned to us.
But it was in season 3 when that decision got made to go
Right.
forward.
When everybody had faith in everybody and we knew we had something special.
But as all of us can remind, that season 1, going with a sequential storytelling was a big gamble, a big risk.
Yep.
And sometimes it worked.
Blew up in our face.
But if I can give credit to Margaret Lesh as the president of Fox Kids at the time, who herself was the biggest advocate for X-Men and was able to champion it. But that's one of the many things that was the juggling, the balancing act, was making sure if we're going to tell a sequential story, that all the pieces can fall into place for it to come out right.
Yeah, and she took the risk of doing that. And then she had to delay for 4 months. She had to tell all the money people, the show's going to be 4 months, start 4 months later than I told you, because we want to get it right before it goes on the air. Yeah. And I've never met another executive that would go on a limb like that and take that, 4 months of stern looks and look at all the money you're costing us, lady, to make sure that everything that first season was right and was in order and was what, the fans were expecting. So, I mean, she hired all of us here, basically. I mean, she hired Stephanie, she hired me and Julia. She's the reason that the show exists and that we're all part of it.
And
going through the book, the one other thing that I was reminded of was all those amazing cameos. In the Marvel offices, we used to sort of, come in on the Monday after the show had aired and be like, did you see they had Vindicator in that one? No, that was Cap. Deadpool's in the background of that one. So my question is, who's to blame for all that?
That's all Larry.
That's all me. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, I love doing that because I wanted to give something back to the fans. And I remember being, as a kid, reading Stanley books where he would put a cameo this is back in the 60s, of a character in Spider-Man. You might see Thor. It was just so exciting to see that as a kid that I wanted to put that into the X-Men so that the fans could see something. that made it feel like there's a larger universe out there. But as I told kids, I would only put those cameos in if it didn't interfere with Julia and Eric's original story, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and that was what wasn't the famous first attempt was a call out for Spider-Man's hand, and legal said you can't do that. And it's like, but we're all part of the Marvel universe. But no.
Not then. So Larry snuck them all through.
You figured out how.
One of these days, Marvel's going to come after him for that.
We'll stand in front of you. We'll protect you.
Yeah.
But yeah, by calling it not Spider-Man's web, but
Yeah, it was
Band of wrist.
with
it was
web.
a mutant arm or
Larry, I
something,
think
I
you're
called it.
safe.
Sorry?
I think the statute of limitations has run out on that. I think you're
Oh,
safe.
good.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well,
Can we thank Larry and Rick also for the tremendous art
The
on the
covers are-
cover and the back of this book? They're just astonishing, and you guys did that for the book, which would thank you so much for that.
Oh,
Labor of love, let me tell you.
oh yes, both of us. And Rick did an excellent job. He's the illustrator. He's the master of what he does. I mean, his work is fantastic, Rick. I love your work.
Well, it was fun to collaborate with you again. I mean, you doing layouts and then giving me the chance to render was really enjoyable. It's one of those things I really enjoy when I'm doing comics. A collaborative effort with somebody who I gel with to begin with.
Well, again, it was a treasure hunt for us to be able to go back and find all this material, just a gift to go through it again and remember all
And-
these wonderful things.
and we thank Marvel and Abrams for the opportunity
Oh,
to do this,
yes,
because
God.
this is just, spending time with the artists again. It's just like reliving your favorite job.
Yes.
So thanks for that, guys. And I think we've run past our time.
Probably.
We are done, guys. But thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. And everybody make sure to go out October 13th and pick up your own copy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And
Definitely.
the art and making of the animated series.
Thank
All right.
you.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks.
so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great seeing everybody.